the meeting will be up on the district's Facebook page, probably the beginning part of next week. And are we ready, Barb? It looks that way. We're ready? Okay, good. All right. So we'll get started with the meeting. We do have a pretty full agenda today. Pledge of Allegiance. Ryan, would you do the Pledge of Allegiance in absence of a student?
I will do that, and I will add the character word of the month since I missed it last time and suffered serious repercussions for that. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. August character word of the month is tenacious, persistent in maintaining, adhering to, or seeking something valued or desired. The trait is responsibility and accountability.
Thank you. And I get to read the, God, that's loud. I get to read the Yakima land acknowledgement today. Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. The people of Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties. Today, we honor those Native peoples who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture. We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial. An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect and a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture. It also honors the truth. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation. And next we have items of board interest. Are there any members of the board who wish to share information with the rest of the board members? No, okay.
Reports to the board.
What?
Any reports to the board?
That's where I am. Members of the.
Have item C board. Okay. Am I in the wrong?
B1, items of board interest. Are you on the right day? Am I on the wrong day?
It's really strange. Hit refresh maybe?
Why?
Yeah, those girls are reading through on all ours.
Okay, let me go back in.
Yeah, she says August 22nd.
It's not the 13th.
Let's just see. Oh. Back here to our meeting. Strange. Now it's populating.
Okay, my apologies. Technology bandits got a hold of my computer this weekend, I guess. So reports to the board. We first have policy 3131, district enrollment and effects with Stacy Locke.
Thank you, President Rice. So this report is out of policy 3131 and is an update to enrollment. So Barb, if we could put that on the screen. Thank you. So what I have here in front of you is 5-year actual FTE, K-12, and ALE enrollment. Some of the key points that you can see, and it will correlate with some of the information that was presented both in the INS report over time and also with Becky and Jake in finance, is that we've seen a gradual decline over the last 5 years. Approximately just a fewer than 600 students in the last 5 years, and primarily in special ed. I think we're about 1.5% lower in special ed, and then about 3% lower in elementary and kinder. We look at our 5-year elementary school enrollment trend. These counts are taken on November 1st. The preschool dip that you see is primarily related to COVID. I can say that as we've opened the new early learning this year, that our numbers are full, and that's very exciting that kids are starting to come back from offline and being afraid to come to school. And so numbers are beginning to increase for in-person learning. If you take a look at the middle school enrollment trend over the last 5 years, again, this is a November 1st count. And you can see that it's basically remained steady over the last few years with a slight decrease. And then if we take a 5-year enrollment trend for high school, probably what jumps out is the 21-22, where again, this is a November 1st count, but there were a lot of second-year seniors that came back in 21-22 with the impact of COVID. And again, we had more options for seniors to get them caught up and to graduate. And so with staff focused in that area, there was a great concerted effort to get seniors on track and get them graduated. And you'll see that when you look at the graduation rate here from the last couple of years. When we look at the 5-year alternative school trend, we realize again with online COVID that numbers did go up. If you look at Yakima Online, Ridgeview Group Home, Staten Academy, Juvenile Detention, Open Doors went up, those others went down. And Yakima Satellite alternative programs are for students who are either too young for Open Doors or find the content in Edgenuity too difficult. So we enroll them in Yakima Satellite alternative programs, and these are students who need hands-on specialized assistance in order to find and maintain academic success through graduation. So patterns and trends, I don't think that you'll see a whole lot of surprise here as we move forward. Again, we have had a steady decrease of about 3% over the last 5 years. We know that our students with disabilities and our English language learners were hit hardest during our pandemic. And we also know that our online alternatives and programs increased for enrollment during that pandemic. When we look at the state of Washington, we see a similar pattern in that there was low enrollment in elementary schools over the last 3 years, as well as their alternative options have increased. And then enrollment was also down by approximately 3% in our public schools. So implications over the last few years, obviously our school district allocations are based on monthly enrollment counts, which you saw on the first slide. State allocations do increase and decrease in real time. And then federal funding is based on our prior year's enrollment. Can I answer any questions for the board?
Any questions for Stacy? I know that there had been questions early on about enrollment or declining enrollment. And I don't know if in the presentations that came before this one, if your questions were answered or not.
I have a couple of questions. The Yakima Online increase in enrollment the last couple of years, does that include the new online platform? Is it called Sol El Sol or something like that? Sol? Yeah, is that inclusive of that, or is that completely separate? Separate. Okay, so these really are just our kids, not the Sol kids. Okay, and then have we looked at, and I know census data is maybe doesn't break it down the way we would, but are there any countywide or statewide trends that show that enrollment, that the number of kids in the age brackets that attend school is going down? Or I guess it's just a 3% decrease each year of overall enrollment, but I'm just wondering, does that correlate? Are there just fewer kids in Yakima County now? Is there a correlation there?
Well, I have to be honest, I haven't looked at the Census Bureau lately, so I don't know that I can answer that question, but I can definitely find out for you. I think what we're seeing is kids not coming to school during the pandemic, which really decreased enrollment, and now we're slowly seeing kids start to come back in, especially at the elementary and at the early learning, where that was where a significant drop occurred. Parents are just afraid to send their kids to school. They weren't sure of the implications of COVID and long-term effects. And so we're starting to, and then parents are back to work now too, so they are not staying home to take care of their children. So we're beginning to see, in fact, Kelly, how many students do we have that came from online back in person in the classroom? Was it about 100? 70s? 71? Kelly, can you please come to the microphone, please?
We'll put you on the spot.
Yeah. I know she really wanted to talk, so thanks, Graciela.
I don't know if that mic is on or not.
Can you please introduce yourself, Kelly?
Kelly Riddle, I'm the Director of Admissions and Enrollment. Hi. So our numbers in kinder are very low. We have 75 spaces right now for kinder. We oftentimes see kinder families coming now to enroll their students and next week. So it's usually typically the week of school, and the week after school is our heavy enrollment period. But our numbers, that's kind of our place right now. And I'm not sure if that is because parents were very afraid during the pandemic. That's a state observation. A lot of parents were given extra funds to stay home with their families, as well as a lot of families working remotely. So just not quite sure why we have that kinder low number right now.
I heard anecdotally that a lot of families decided to withdraw their kids from school and homeschool them. Do we track when that's the reason that kids withdraw from school?
We do take the information for families that are wanting to homeschool, but we are seeing more students coming back to in-person and less wanting to go to homeschool. It's not as big of a number or an amount. It's really not even to talk about it. There's just a few families that are coming in to opt for the homeschooling piece as opposed to a larger number during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. No further questions from me.
Any other questions for either Kelly or Stacy? Have we looked at birth rates for those students who would be coming into kinder this year? Was, I don't know what, 2000 and what, 18, 17? Was that a low birth rate year? Do we know that?
One of the things we don't really know sometimes until things start happening, so that we start to see that all of a sudden we have this really low number of, or we have the spaces. We have 75 spaces district-wide in kinder. So that does, I have been thinking about that, looking at that, but we really don't know it until they come and enroll, what it looks like. And again, it's till the end of the month until we really have our kinder numbers, because people are tend to be late in enrolling kinders.
And what kind of outreach do we do for kinder families that maybe this is their first foray into public school? What kind of outreach do we do to them to kind of say, now's the time to enroll in school, and bring your child, we'd love to see them?
I would invite Kirsten. I know that we had a campaign, and would you like to share for our kinders what that looked like?
It's hot, huh?
Hot mic.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Kelly and I actually worked together as a team and brought together a committee to work on a kindergarten enrollment campaign this year. So we worked hard on trying to think of different ways that we could reach our community and our kinders. We went as far as sending posters and information out to all of the area daycares, pediatricians, anywhere we thought we could reach families outside of our own district. We had billboards in place. We made adorable little kits that were exciting for them to receive. Mr. Gonzalez behind us worked with us as far as getting laptops released if we needed to do that. So we were very thrilled to be able to reach our community in that way through a campaign.
Great, thank you.
We also, admissions and enrollment, we went out to every building, set up a time in the evenings to go to every single elementary school, spend a couple of hours, bring the treat, or the, what are they called? Tote bags. Yeah, tote bags. I brought my crew, McKinney-Vento liaison, as well as the registrars. And we did not have high turnout. I do think we need to reassess that and look at it, but I think we tried to, advertise and make a presence. I think we enrolled about 100 students during that time in the springtime for all buildings.
I think part of the low attendance at that, and we do have a scheduled debrief on that for next year, was that it was year one. And so the timing of it was, we were really on top of it and trying to get these meetings set up. So now having a little bit more notice and some repetitive value to that, I think we will have some good attendance to those nights.
Yeah, it's sort of like 8th grade or 6th grade orientation night only for kinders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll learn from our mistakes this year. Yeah.
Well, good. Okay, thank you for that. I think it's important that we continue to stay on top of whatever outreach we decide is appropriate to welcome our families, especially those with kindergartners, maybe their first time in school, into the public school system. So thank you very much. Any other questions for Kelly or Stacy? Okay.
Just a quick one, and
Go
we don't
ahead.
have to answer today. In terms of that percentage, I think it was 3%, right? Every year we're seeing. I think that might be a question for our superintendent. What is that threshold when we start to impact programs, budgets, those type of things? So we don't have to answer that now, but I just something that comes to mind for me is what is the threshold, and when do we start to think about whatever, the consequences of a decrease in enrollment in the school district?
We did open the non-resident enrollment for high school. We added a couple more weeks to that this year. And I had 6 this morning that I worked on. So those are trickling in, if you will. So I think that's, we look at discipline, attendance, and grades, but I think there's probably about 25 students that we've looked at from outlying districts over this extra time that we've opened up that enrollment piece.
Trevor?
Appreciate the question, Director Navarro. We do focus on looking what we can do to maintain and bring more students into our system. So I would not be able to come to you today with a definitive threshold and what that would look like. On the other hand, I can tell you that the efforts of SOL, our expansion to the K-8 online school, the development of a homeschool co-op are all opportunities that we have to bring people back into the district or into the district in another manner that will fund positions. So I'm happy to say that we're always considering what it can look like to maintain in other ways to make sure that we have support staff and other items in place to serve our students. But we'll have to look at establishing what that threshold can be.
Is the decline 3% each year, or is it 3% over the course of these last, 5 years?
It's 3% over the last 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's right around 600 students over the
Yeah.
last 5 years.
I think I read somewhere that across the state, the average across the state is 3% from last year or from the year before that. And we didn't see that kind of a decrease this past year.
No, we did not.
Okay.
I'd also just like to go back and talk about that threshold item, because one of the other factors that we're not talking about today is what it looks like with our IPD increases when those flow through from the state, and what that does to negotiations, and then the amount of funding then shifts. It's kind of a moving target. So when you're asking about the implications of population dwindling, it also then is in conjunction with where are we at with our different labor unions, and how does that then coexist, and how do we maintain? It's really tricky. So I think having that definitive number would be difficult in factoring in other items that are simply in flux year to year. It doesn't mean we can't have some parameters, maybe a looser guide.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, Stacy, Kelly, thank you. Kirsten, thank you for your on the spot information. This is good. This is good information for us, for the board to have in their back pockets when people start asking about enrollment decline and that sort of thing. Okay, next, now, we'll get to where I was before and you all were not. Items of board interest. The first number here is reports from members of the board. Does anyone have anything to share with the rest of the board?
I just want to share, when I commend the superintendent and the staff that organized the opening events today. I thought that was such a fun event to be a part of, and it was very inspiring to hear Superintendent Green's comments and our keynote speaker, Mr. Cruz. His presentation and speech I thought was very, very good, and I it was a little overwhelming walking into the space, and 2,000 people were in the room and nobody was masked. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but it was such a fun event. And again, I thought the staff were very engaged throughout the entire presentation, and it was a lot of fun. So great job on that.
Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Well, I held back, Director Villanueva. I was going to have everybody stand as you walked in, but I refrained. I appreciate that. I credit really goes to our teaching and learning department and the work that they put forward in establishing not only our 3 key levers, but then building an opportunity for us to message that collectively to our staff across the system, and making it very clear that we're in support of principals and their work, induction, mentoring, coaching, and then also developing professional learning teams into professional learning communities at the building and district level. So we have a very clear, definitive focus now laid out, and I think that the messaging that I would have is that we are becoming laser-like in the things that we value and put our efforts towards, because we know that it leads to great outcomes for students. So I'm excited about to see where this goes in the next year, and by all accounts, the event this morning had some wonderful kudos across the board. So I was able to speak with some other of our negotiating units and teams out there in the hours afterwards, and people were very positive about the feel. I myself have participated in welcome back opportunities here in the Yakima School District over the course of my 11 years as a teacher in the district, way back when I think Ben was the superintendent, when we had them.
When we could hold them in an auditorium.
That's right. And this one, I think, took the cake. I did have a couple people that had shared, and I have the text messages of, in my 30 years of education, this was the best opening day that I've seen. And again, the credit goes to our teaching and learning and the work that they put in making this happen. Dr. Rodriguez, would you like to add anything?
Okay.
I usually prep her ahead of time, but I caught her cold.
No pressure, Jenny.
No, I just was like, I'm a little bit speechless. That's quite an honor to have a veteran educator make that statement. So I just would love to recognize Dr. Ellis is here. She's my right arm, but really our entire department did a lot of work and coordinated with many other departments here at Central Services to make today happen. The t-shirts were Kirsten's idea, and we worked together on those, and
Somos uno.
yeah, somos uno. So it was a good day.
I'd also add that our principals did an excellent job in bringing their staffs together. I think you saw Lewis and Clark jumped out with their purple shirts, and you saw other buildings that had already kind of unified. And it's nice to see that kind of pride and one-upsmanship within a healthy environment where they're happy about who they are and how they come together and work. And I think we're going to see some very healthy outcomes in those areas. So we're excited about bringing to you in the next couple of weeks our new staff members and presenting those teams to you.
Great. Looking forward to that. Okay, Norm or Ryan, do you have anything to add about this morning?
No, I think that's pretty well sums it up.
Okay.
Very nice morning.
We haven't had an opening day event for at least the last 5 years, at least. And a couple of those years we know why. But it was exciting to be amongst that many educators and school district members of our school district family who were excited about school starting again. That's nice. Okay. Good discussion. Next, we have the superintendent's report. Mr. Superintendent.
So Director Villanueva is pretty smart. She took that off the table, so now I won't have to elaborate on that. So we're going to move along very quickly. She's figured me out. The update I have then, aside from the kickoff, which was just shared, is that we have some dates for open houses. So they do start this evening. I believe we have 7 different open house events. And I'll be attending a couple of those along with my team after the meeting today. So we look forward to going out and participating at Adams, MLK, Roosevelt, McKinley, Lewis and Clark, Washington, and YB Tech are the ones on deck this evening. Aside from that, the other items that I have for you today are about our city YSD joint meeting. And I believe that's next Monday. And the way it's shaping up, the city is really interested in breaking bread with us as well. So we're looking at having an hour ahead of time, and there'll be I believe we're 3:30 to 4:30 will be our meeting. And then from just kind of a transition period of 4:30 to 5 where we can grab a meal. We'll have something here prepared. And then we'll start the regular session. There'll be a longer presentation in which we have an individual coming to share data around a joint program that we participated in, and that'll take around an hour. And then the other item on the agenda will be an update in conjunction with Chief Murray. It'll be Sarah Cordova from our Safety and Security around Handle with Care, our Handle with Care program. So those are the items. I just want to make sure you came with an appetite next week. So we look forward to that. In addition, we have 2 more items to share. One is around electric buses. So I know that was a topic of conversation. So I was going to ask Director Beckett if his Tesla came in yet. I'm not sure.
Not yet.
Not quite. Keep checking. So we have applied for grants in the past, and obviously the one that you approved last week and the funding was for 3 buses, and we have there's a lot of funding out there for grants, and so we're looking at the opportunity to pursue some more of those and have buses come in. But I certainly wanted to give you a heads up, seeing that there was some conversation about that if we're going this route of bringing in electric buses, you'll see more of those opportunities come before you as a board. So at some point it might be good to have a longer conversation before that next request comes forth, if the board is so moved.
Okay.
So just a heads up in that area. And then the last item that I would share with you is we have some wonderful calendars that we would like to share with you today that have been shared with the community. So as you can see, Kristen Fitter, aka Vanna White, is coming up here to the front to share a little bit about the calendar and the excitement around it. So would you please?
On?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for giving me a little bit of time at the mic, Superintendent Green. For our board members that follow us on social media, we've had some families chiming in as they are receiving their calendars in the mail this week. And they've been really excited about it. So I wanted to make sure that you knew all of the different elements that are included in our calendar. And then I have one to send home with you today as well. So in the mail this past week, we have sent out the 2022-23 school calendar. And I'm going to share some kind of exciting things that are in this. The first thing that you see is a magnet that is attached. And we have Howie, our care character for the Health and Wellness Education Center. It is a magnet that they can simply take off and put on their refrigerator to remind them that we do have health and wellness services at 331 North 1st Street available to them. And so that's a quick access for that.
We're not sure if any of you are dog people, but we do have that.
Really?
Yes.
I was going to ask if there, is that like, it's not a real dog? It's just a
Not yet.
Okay, I was like, oh, it's not a dog.
Ooh, one more for the house.
Howie is a border collie inspired by several of our staff members who lovingly have border collies. I'm going to skip just a little bit so you can see it's an 11-month calendar and it's branded with the Yakima School District branding, but we have incorporated some student art. We have the character education. Howie appears throughout the calendar and remind us to wash our hands and to get our shots and to go to the doctor. So lots of different things there. We have some digital QR codes that are throughout so that you can scan with your cell phone and get directly to more updated information. But the entire calendar is bilingual and bicultural in that you can see that August starts with English. We have August and then Agosto is secondary. But if you switch to September, the next month, then Spanish is the lead and English is secondary. So it carries throughout the calendar in that way. So we have an 11-month calendar. July is skipped since we are focusing on the other things sometimes in July. But we have information on Parent Square. So all of our families can get connected on Parent Square. We have a 98% contact rate with Parent Square right now. And we think that that has happened this week in large part due to the calendar coming out. We also have attendance information. And you'll notice that on every month, we tell them how many learning days are taking precedence in that month. So the green days are the learning days in August. You can go in September and see all the learning days there. And then at the beginning, it gives you a chart on how to remain successful with that attendance.
Nice.
Yeah. And then after you get through all of the beautiful art and the months, we have our school directory. And there's QR codes and URLs that go directly to their school calendars that tell them everything that's happening. And all of the open house dates that you just got are in here as well. So any question? Oh, and I should pay a special tribute to one of our sponsors that helped us produce this, which is GISA, that has the Eisenhower and Davis debit cards.
Nice.
So I'll give each of you one of these. Do you have any questions?
I just want to thank, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I think we maybe are going to say the same thing. Just want to thank you for that work, Kristen. I think that having, delivering something to families that they can put their hands on and see, and all the information and tips and, you know, the funness of Howie and providing kind of those health reminders, I think are really fun. So I'm hopeful that this will have a positive impact on attendance overall in the district. So thank you so much for all that effort. And thank you for getting us a hard copy too.
Of course.
I know that putting those types of things together is a labor of love because you've got to love it in order to do it. So thank you for the time that you and your staff spent putting that together. It's going to be a great value for the school district families. Thank you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, last thing, I just, I forgot at the beginning to excuse Assistant Superintendent Anthony Murrieta is in negotiations at this time. So I did excuse him from this meeting. And that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Kirsten. All right. Next on the agenda is a discussion of the equity audit. This is something the board had asked for, and I see Marcelo is perched and ready to launch here. Do you want to lead into this?
I would love to lead in, absolutely. So let me make sure. So Marcello Scambolari is here with us today. You may recognize him as our equity program manager. And the reason we have the board discussion on the calendar is Director Navarro had requested time to have a conversation with the board. So we have some items prepared depending on how the board would like to proceed. We did share a slideshow on the equity audit previously, so we could go back and recap that presentation if the board would like to go that route. We also have attached the Yakima School District Equity Audit Report itself. But since this is a board discussion, we wanted to leave that opportunity up to the board as far as how to proceed, whether to go forward with a PowerPoint, to go through the equity audit itself, or to start addressing questions just from the get-go, depending on your pleasure.
Any input from board members on preferences for proceeding? Raymond.
Since I was the primary board member that had questions, I think I would like, if the board is okay, I do have a list of questions and some thoughts I'd like to share. Maybe we can start there, and then maybe not expecting answers to all my questions, but maybe just a general response and how, just to help me understand. So I'm really trying to understand the equity audit, the direction we're going, and the purpose and so forth, and what we're measuring and so forth. So
okay. So, since you're the one with the questions.
Sure. So since that is the question, I think that when you're talking about the purpose of the equity audit, I think we might go ahead and go back to the slide presentation, because I know that does address the purpose therein. So I'll turn it over to Marcello to take us through a bit of that.
Yeah, and maybe I'll do a quick run through and then just put a pin in any questions you have, or stop me if you want to stop me. But I'll try to go kind of quickly through it to kind of see what sparks your interest or what answers questions you might have. And I did update this quite a bit. So if you're looking at the stored version, it won't be updated. But if you look at the live version, then it's updated. Yeah. And so just for context, as a district with a large ELL, SPED, migrant, and Latino population and free and reduced lunch students, we engaged multiple stakeholders from Aaron Jones, ERS, Insight Education, leading educators to do a multi-pronged look at our district and how we can serve students better. And diving into some data points that would serve why we're doing that work, you can see that our district is 80% Hispanic Latino students and almost 70% white teachers, and that bridges over to our building leaders also, who are predominantly mass majority white. And looking at the outcomes of our Latino students and our ELL students and our migrant students, they are achieving below levels of other demographics and above levels of other demographics, depending on which demographic you zoom into. And at the end of the slide is kind of like a resource bank of kind of state data you can compare to this, but by and large, we're lower than the state data or higher in cases of exclusion. You can see kind of the programs and characteristics. Students aren't necessarily more highly excluded, as in suspensions or expulsions, as compared to Yakima District, where those minority populations are experiencing more suspensions, more expulsions. Those who are homeless or have military parents or are Section 504. So some of those inequities that we saw in our system, along with our graduation rate compared to peers across the state and within our district, the disparities in those graduation rates. And sorry, it's a lot of data, and I think you can zoom in where you want to think more about, how are our ELL students doing? How are our migrant students doing? You can zoom into each of those and see the outcomes. But the large story is that there are inequities in the academic outcomes for our students compared to peers across the state and compared within our district between income levels. And here you can see, especially in Loud, is that we have about 20% of our students go to and through a four-year college within 8 years of graduation. So about 1 in 5. And that is lower than the state average, which is a little closer to 40%. And there's our state. So we're looking at 34%, and then another 13% getting their associates, and that's at the state level. And about 90% of theirs are persisting through that first year of college. And looking at that broken down by female and male, we can see our female students have a slightly higher completion of college within 8 years of graduating high school. And you can see the disparities in between different ethnic groups from Yakima. And again, at the end of the deck, you can go to the state and see that we are below the state in most, if not all of these. And so there's that disparity or inequity between us and those other districts across the state. And so an engaging insight to look at that and give us ideas about why is this happening, what in our system is happening compared to other districts across the nation and across the state. They dove in with a document review of all of our documents, a quantitative review, stakeholder review, which was taking out small groups and talking to those teachers, community members, students, and then finalizing that with the executive council. And so that was the root of it. And I can go pretty quickly through this next part.
Actually, could you back up just
Yes,
a moment
please.
to that other one? And my memory, not too long ago, it just happened today when we spoke with, or we listened to Dr. Cruz, and those in attendance will remember that he started with the design of school and who it was meant to serve. And one of the things, just as a recap, is that I remember him saying, no offense, ladies, but the system was not designed for you. And he said it was not designed for me as a person of color. And he said even some of our white males here that weren't landholders at the time, it wasn't designed for them. And the thing that he addressed, where you might remember, he talked about the 4 Ps, and the 4 Ps being policy, practices, procedures, and then he added the 4th, which was personal mindset. And so he was talking about the opportunities that we have within our system to see where those inequities exist so that we can then, of course, address what those inequities are. And I think what Marcello is showing you at the current moment is that those inequities do exist. And then if you go back or forward to the next slide that you were talking about, I believe it was the document and process review. There it is. So when we had people come in for the audit, it was to determine where we are as a system, just in the definition of audit, but looking at the funding of how we fund and allocate resources in our system. They took examples of external communications and community meeting agendas. They looked at our policies and curriculum materials. And that's just in the document process review. So each one of those talks about the different components. So when we obviously had spent time as a board, not only coming up with a strategic plan, but then actually working on an equity policy, and then revisiting our definition of equity, which was the condition that would be achieved if one's group membership no longer predicted in a statistical sense how one fares. Equity is the outcome, not just the access to opportunity. So to monitor and determine where we are in addressing policies, practices, procedures, and personal mindset, we have to know what that baseline is and where we're at and how we can then address each of those individual components to make sure that we're crosswalking the equity policy and strategic plan and other of the documents to make sure that we're closing everything within that statistical sense and reach that point where it doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter what side of the town you live on. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. Because we as a district have addressed all of the policies, practices, procedures, and personal mindsets to eliminate that opportunity gap.
And he also reminded us that all means every child who will become an independent adult.
Yes, and the definition, I love the definition that he gave, was at or exceeding grade level every year.
At the end of every year, yeah.
Very, very nice message around equity and those supports in place. Back to you.
Yeah. And so looking at the Insight audit, they put it into these 5 buckets, and we can dig deeper into any of them if you want. But for a quick overview of the 60-page report distilled down to about 5 slides, they gave us recommendations within each. So for one example, within structures, systems, and resources, establish a district-wide focus on equity that is incorporated into the work of all departments and schools. So actually integrating the work of equity into everybody's role so that everyone is an equity officer. And the effectiveness of that is instead of having an equity department or a singular equity person, everyone within their own position knows what most would serve students within their position. If you're in transportation, you know best how to make transportation more equitable. So if we put the charge on each person and support them in that, then we will move forward more quickly and more effectively than if we centered it on one person or one position. So that's just an example of one recommendation from them. And if you go through each domain, you can see each of the recommendations. If you want me to drill deeper, we can. And then looking at those domains, if we cross-reference them with the equity policy that the Yakima Schools has passed, our climate and culture, leadership and partnerships, talent recruitment and retention, teaching and learning, which were the 4 pillars of our equity work. There's a lot of crossover between those, and they gave us a lot to work on within each of those buckets. And this is our equity definition that kind of centers us in this work. And to the superintendent's point, this is about making sure that nobody statistically has a different outcome based solely on their group membership, and that all groups are achieving at that same level. And then looking at kind of a summary of those, really it's about building capacity within the district, and also providing supports and providing groups. And that work plays out in multiple ways currently in the district that we're pushing forward this year. And to give you an idea of what that actually looks like, Leading Educators currently is doing professional development with our teachers on more equitable practices for English language learners or migrant students or students who you don't share the same background as, and learning their stories and bringing their stories into the classroom, and having themselves see themselves reflected in the curriculum and in content. A focus on professional learning within the PLC structure. And as a whole district, we are committing to that collaboration of teachers to better serve their students, because each teacher knows best how to serve their students. And so providing them the professional collaboration to improve as professionals. And then building up a teacher group. We're creating 2 teacher groups this year to come together as teachers of color who usually move out of the profession quicker than white teachers, to create a support group there so they can problem solve and discuss what it means to be a teacher within our district and within our state and within our nation, and problem solve how they want to better serve students and better serve themselves. And there'll be multiple groups that are meeting around equity work in the district. And there is no district mandate on what this looks like. It's teachers talking about what their practice looks like and what's happening with students and what they want to see. And then a real focus on student voice. If students are providing feedback on the system, then inevitably the system is more equitable. If students are telling us what they want and they're changing and pushing policies and pushing change in the district, which we've seen this last year and the year before, then inevitably outcomes will be more equitable. And so that work is happening through our Student Advisory Fellowship, which we received a College Spark grant for, and then also doing student voice circle work at schools across the district. So you can kind of see this is what Yakima believes equity is being more responsive to the identity of our students and our teachers, learning more about them and supporting them in ways that they tell us they want support. And so that's what it looks like currently. And then moving forward, it's really about creating more cohesion around what those supports look like, and a longer term plan for what they look like, so that we see the progression in a 3-year cadence or a 5-year cadence, and setting that up as a whole district. And so that's kind of like a 30,000 foot overview. And then we can kind of drill down where we want more clarification or have specific questions or open thoughts.
Okay, Raymond, you're up.
I'm not going to speak that fast for sure. So part of my difficulty with understanding the report was you had the domains, right? And under the domains, each domain there was a summary and insight summarize what some research literature pertaining to that domain, right? So, and then offered recommendations, did the review, the evaluation, then offered the recommendation. So I didn't always see the correlation between that research and what they were claiming to the recommendations. Okay, and I'll point some of that out here in a minute. So, and I didn't think they went deep enough. They went more surface in terms of identifying any issues with equity within the Yakima School District. And that's just what I'm thinking, by reviewing the report. Now, if you go to domain number 1, structure, systems, and resources, right? So one of the things that they said, and I'm quoting from that summary, right? The shaded summary of at the beginning of the report, that Insight Educational Group inserted. And one of the things they said, that districts must intentionally design organizational structures and routines that support the success of historically underserved students. Otherwise, schools may function as sites of oppression, right? And rather than places of opportunity. So we just saw the data on our students. So does that mean the Yakima School District is functioning as a site of oppression, right? I don't know. That they put that there, so that makes me wonder then if we're doing that. Okay, so that's just a side question. Also, they said that a district must rely on fundamental systemic change throughout the organization, as well as the anti-racist beliefs and action of individual educators and leaders. So, and then they identified some of the areas we need to work on, which I don't know if they correlated with those two statements or the summary that they had for the domain. And they had some recommendations, focus on equity incorporated in all work of departments and schools. So as real general for me, infuse equity in the work of school-based instructional leadership teams to ensure equitable practices. So for me, it's like I really need a research question there. What is it that we really want to dig out with this domain, right? So for me, it would be, how do the school and school district policies impact hiring practices and managing financial resources? Why do district policies exist, right? And what is it that they are designed to do, to whom and why? See, that for me, that's more information. That would give me more information in terms of, are we being equitable or not in the district? And then how do our policies, because we've talked about equity meaning policies, right, that were developed. Like you, Dr. Green, you mentioned that policies and education was developed for a certain population of students, not the current students that were served. So how do the current policies impact learners, families, and the community? And I don't know if this domain or the recommendations answered that. So to what extent does the Yakima School District current policies reflect diversity, equity, equitable, and inclusive environment? How about leadership? What role does equity play within the day-to-day administration of individual schools and the school district? To me, that's that's information that would be useful for me. What about policy implementation and impact? How is it currently impacting our students? Could we say that it's impacting their academic performance? I don't know, but I think that's what we're trying to say indirectly. Maybe I'm wrong there, but if we're saying that policies exist to support another population of students, and our students are primarily of color, and they're not succeeding, then something's wrong with our policies, I would think, right? So that's kind of where it's just leading me to more questions. Again, is the Yakima School District functioning as a site of oppression, like this group? I forget the name of the group, but that they mentioned in their summary. And for me, it would be important to know what specific departments and schools are implementing equity well, and which ones aren't, and what are the reasons for that, right? I know we have some schools that are really low performing, and what's going on? Why is that? Is it inequity? Is it systems? Is it policies? What are all those things that I would think that would be better information in terms of figuring out where we're at with equity? Now, number 2, Insight Educational Group. So it's culture and community. So we need to develop a culture of racial competence, anti-racist climate, right? Asset-based approach that, or a culture that mitigates potentially harmful effects of policies and practices on staff and students of color. See, so what are we doing with that, right? And they talk, and I would think, dress. I know we've had conversations about student dress and hairstyles and all that type of thing. Is that something that's getting in the way of teaching kids in the Yakima School District? So how about restorative discipline? I know we have a plan in place for that. It doesn't mention that. Let's see, and some questions I have.
Let me jump in for just a moment. I know you have a lot of questions, but I really appreciate the questions that you're coming up with. And I think that in a large part, the report, the audit is doing exactly what it should be doing, because it's surfacing so many of these questions from you and your perspective, which is what we needed to do across the system. So when many of these questions you're asking, those are further down the road and things that we need to fetter out and determine. When you look at the system that we have of our definition of equity and wanting all students to achieve regardless of who they are, and that's not happening, that is evidence in itself that we have inequitable practices occurring. And if you're looking at, we want to find out which school is doing it well and which one isn't, that is a key indicator for us right there, that the ones that are doing it well are the ones that are exceeding that standard when we talk about all means all at grade level or beyond. So I wouldn't expect a higher level audit report to get down into the finite detail of which you're asking. I think that is the step that we need to now take as district leaders, is to determine, okay, let's take this across the system and look at what are the policies that are working, what are other additional policies that we may need to make sure that things are equitable across the system, or that the supports are in place. So I do think that this is actually the work that's happened in the audit is certainly not going to be at such a finite level, but it does give us that opportunity to ask the questions that you're asking and figure out how to then come forth with those answers and change the system. Kind of goes back to the statement, and I know you've probably heard it before, being in education, every system is perfectly designed to produce the results that it gets. So, to put it pretty bluntly, Coach Bill Parcells says your record, you are who you are. You are who your record says you are. And that's currently where we're at, is we want to know who we are as a district, and we're comparing that to standards either across the state or internally. We see where we're at and where we need to be more successful. And to do that, we have to make sure that we're putting in the supports, whether it be a school level, a team level, a PLC level, or even an individual student level, so that they have what they need moving forward. It goes back to, again, to Dr. Cruz and what he was talking about when he was mentioning going into a situation where we went into the pandemic, and we're talking about the one-to-one devices, and he walked us through what that meant for his family and his 3 girls, and how he was able to get online and get the internet that he needed right away and get the computers that they needed right away. Well, that wasn't the same for every individual, and we certainly did not experience that in the same way across our system. So that was an inequitable event that happened in the lives of our country, but also then, of course, in our city with our students in our district. And that's just one small example. So I see these questions that you're asking as something we won't be able to come back right away and say, okay, here are your laundry list of answers to each of these components. But it is something that we can come back and revisit and say, okay, Director Navarro, this is one of the questions that you surfaced. This is what we've been able to uncover and how we're addressing this across our system, and where this equity audit came and revealed that this was an item that we're now pursuing. So just wanted to insert that, because I know you have a bunch.
Well, that's what I expected from this report, is those details. Not like, again, I believe that the recommendations and the summaries were very general.
Yeah.
And I then, for some reason, I didn't understand that from there we would do a deep dive.
Well, I think it's probably the definition of a higher level audit versus a fine, because the type of audit that the detail that you're asking for, I don't think there's any way we could have been afforded an audit that would have taken us to that level of detail and results.
If equity is our top priority, then we should probably find a way to do that, then, I believe so. But let me continue.
Sure.
Okay. So in terms of let me see, and I'm almost done here. So in terms of domain number 3, equity and educated workforce.
Which page?
Is that?
Which page? Yeah.
On which?
On the equity audit? I was
Not
just trying to follow along.
Domain number 3, did I say? So it says that most schools do not effectively recruit and retain educators of color. Teachers of color tend to leave. I think you mentioned this. The profession or transfer schools at higher rates than white educators. And There's a trend to place higher percentages of teachers of color in hard-to-staff, low-income schools with less experience, leadership, and fewer professional development opportunities. So that's what the Insight Educational Group included in their summary under that. And they recommended a staff person, an Office of Talent Management to work on some things. And so again, you know, that kind of sparked my question: what is an effective teacher? Is the YSD effectively recruiting and retaining educators of color? I mean, who are we focusing on and when we go out to recruit? What are the current school district recruitment, hiring, onboarding, and retention practices? So those would tell me more about if we're being equitable or not. What are the percentage of teachers leaving or staying in the district? Which ones are leaving and which ones are more likely to stay? Those type of questions, right? Which percentage of teachers, because this all correlates to the performance, right? Or the academic achievement. Which are we placing, like as Insight indicated that most schools do or school districts do, place teachers of color in the hard to serve or hard to staff schools? Are we doing that? I don't think so, but they didn't refer to that, but they listed that as one of the critical areas of it, of being inequitable, or having inequitable practices. So, and then they said something about a low percentage of teachers means that a district cannot provide excellent educational opportunities. Is that, I'm not sure what to do with that, because we do have a low number of teachers of educators of color. So does that, can I say that that's why we're not having excellent educational opportunities or academic achievement? I don't know. So those are just, again, they're just spurring me to have more questions. And then this one struck me particularly kind of, I don't know, I just didn't know what to make of this. But for me, I know we have a mentorship program. Why provide that for educators of color in the early years only, right? If somebody came to me and I'm a first year teacher, say, hey, we have a mentorship program, I might think I'm not prepared enough or competent enough, while my white counterpart teacher doesn't have that or doesn't have to participate in that program. Does that mean that person is more prepared or competent?
We have mentoring across the board for all educators.
So, but this specifically says it doesn't say for all educators. So that's my thing, is why not have, and if we do, then that's fine. So, but I thought that was kind of strange. And then the 4 is professional growth. It talks about, in their summary, talks about dismantling systemic racism, develop the racial consciousness of educators. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean implicit dealing with implicit bias or stereotypes? And I'm not sure. So I think if we can define that a little bit more. Professional learning that has to critically examine individual and systemic biases, so that teachers can improve their effectiveness in working with all students. So those are, and then the last one is curriculum, instruction and learning, that something about racially conscious curriculum and teaching practices are beneficial to all educators and learners. Educators must reflect on systems, biases, and practices that lead to inequitable outcomes. And there's a tendency to fix students, right? The teachers must be race conscious, promote student voice, all the things that we said. So just some questions. To what extent do the Yakima School District curriculum and instructional policies, practices cultivate an equitable work and learning environment? In what ways can the district support changes to school and classroom curriculum and practices? What about academics? How do teachers deliver instruction, right? Then talk about that. How do teachers and staff interact with students? What about instructional material, discipline? How about working with SPED students? Accommodations and assessments, all those type of things. Classroom management, all those things that are not at the 30,000 foot level. Those are more in the weeds, right? And curriculum, right? How are, let me see, let me get back. To what extent is the curriculum culturally responsive and representative of diverse cultures? To what extent is there fidelity to and accountability for implanting culturally and linguistically responsive curricula? And to what extent are students and families see themselves represented in the curriculum? So those are some questions. What are the greatest needs and opportunities that we have, right, to increase equitable outcomes? What are some strengths in the districts? I didn't hear a lot of strengths that were outlined, that things that we're doing well already in the district. So, and then, how about programmatic equity? What does the data show in terms of student access and enrollment into AP honors level courses, advanced or highly capable and IB program? What are those? Are there any gatekeeper courses or programs that keep them, that determine whether they go into those programs? What is the GPA to get in? What are the other criteria? Do they have to have a parent referral? Do they have to have a certain GPA? Do they have to take certain classes? The recommendation by a teacher? I mean, all those things for me will give you more information in terms of, are we being equitable in terms of those programs? So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I know it's a lot of
Very
questions.
large nutshell.
Yeah, it's a very large one, a whole bag of that. So, but, as Dr. Green, as you mentioned, it did spur some more questions on my part. And again, I thought I was expecting something in more detail. I've seen reports from other districts, and they were in very much detail. They broke down all the stats in terms of academic achievement, everything, kind of the things that I talked about. And so that's what I was expecting from this group, and not expecting a plan to figure out if we're being equitable or not, or providing equitable education to all students. So I'm not sure where I go from here on this, but those are my current thoughts and my questions. Thank you.
Well, I think, Raymond, you've given us a lot to think about, some of which falls appropriately in board work, in our overview responsibilities and our policy setting and so forth. Some of which falls within the means area, which is what the superintendent is responsible for. If I got the sense that you've written down all of your questions, if that's the case, and you could share those with the rest of us and send them to the superintendent, I think maybe at some future date, we parse through those and just determine which ones are the board responsibilities and which one are staff responsibilities. And then kind of send staff off and to do what they do. And we take care of the stuff that is our responsibility as part of this audit report. There are some things in there, I think, that do fall within our arena. But I wondered how that sounded to you.
Sounds okay. Sounds like a plan. I think that the one other thing that's complicating this whole process is the definition of equity seems to be changing, evolving every year, right? First, it was about equality. Everybody gets the same. Then it's like everybody gets what they need to be successful. Now it's dismantling of systemic racism, right? And then we had the training with YSD, and they're kind of going a kind of a different direction, including some of the parts of our definition, but really kind of, I don't know. So it seems like they're going a slightly different direction. So I think that's complicating some of this, right? I'm still, my reference is the equity training that we did as a board, right? And I know that Aaron said that the writing or the readings that we did was more this style, right? And more flexing and more in your face type of thing. So I know that with the WASDA equity audit or equity definition, they then talk about dismantling racism and anti-racist institution, all those type of vocabulary words or terms. They didn't really talk about those. So I'm just wondering, I'm thinking the board, we need to look at that.
They did have a book.
Yes.
that Aaron recommended that we do a book study on.
Yeah.
I think that would be an excellent start for the board. I don't know how the rest of you feel about it.
I've read that book. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It really takes it a different step than just addressing racism. It really talks about empowering kids and so it's really a much more positive.
Yeah. Yeah, because WAS attached the self-sufficiency part to it, right? And so that's the part I think that we're missing. So how do we foster self-sufficiency and encourage that within our students? Not just say it's the system or policies or systemic racism or whatever, the terms are currently. So, but I think we're off to a good start. And this is all good and exciting things for me. I really love this stuff. And I really appreciate the superintendent and the team doing this audit and going this direction and really and entertain my thoughts and my questions, right? But I really like the direction we're going because we do really need to address the academic achievement of our students because it's been too long that the numbers that their achievement has been low, right? And so we need to do what we need to do to help correct that. So thank you.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Martha, I wonder if one option for us to consider could be including the equity policy, the board equity policy as part of our policy governance cycle. It's not currently calendared for regular review.
Oh, okay.
So that I think that could be something for us to look at when we can determine whether it's an annual review or every 6 months or once a quarter review, whatever that cycle is. But I think that would be a good opportunity for us to, for the superintendent and his team to review this with us and what the plans are. I think to hear what Superintendent Green's comments are that this is kind of step one, and step two then is if equity is everybody's job, then each department head or whatever, then the next step might be that they begin to dig in, produce that kind of data. And so a regular review of regular policy governance review of the board equity policy might provide that regular and ongoing opportunity for us to keep tabs on the progress of equity within Yakima schools.
Yeah, I think we certainly can add that, was it 0500? To our, though, in fact, everything in the zeros and the 1000s should be on a review cycle for board policy review. I know in the upper thousands, 14s and 15s, 17s, those are kind of quasi-operational, but they do cover responsibilities of the board. So we'll take a look at that. And I think that's another good start for us. Ryan.
Thank you, President Rice. Just a couple of observations. First off, thank you, Mr. Skembler, for the additional info. There were extra slides that you presented tonight that weren't in our regular packet, so I'm hopeful that maybe we can see those down the road.
You could send those to Barb. She can update the board docs file for us.
Thank you. See, you're on it. Thank you so much, Barb. Thank you. That's great. Because I appreciate that. It's great data. The second observation, I in my short 9 months or so here, I've really only seen one school presentation where they talked about student voice from the perspective of how students perceive some of these conversations we're having within their daily life and work within the school building. And I thought that was really telling and really interesting. I have it at home. I couldn't even tell you which school it was right now, but I have it at home. I remember thinking that was really kind of neat to see, and I'd love to see more of that. And I know that there's been some of that work done, so that might be really helpful for us, because I feel like a lot of this conversation has always been adult-driven and in some ways political-driven, so it's nice to see that student voice added into it. My third observation, I think, kind of sort of echoes something that Raymond said earlier as far as the equity definition. I can't remember a time when we haven't discussed this, when whoever was discussing our equity definition paraphrased it in some way, shape, or form, which tells me as an outsider coming in that maybe our equity definition isn't as understandable as it could be. And I know this is probably settled gospel in some people's minds, but I would just encourage the board to maybe think about really looking at that again and making sure it's something that really does explain exactly what we're trying to say. Because I think I think that just saves a lot of time and potential heartache in the process. But random observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Norm?
Actually, I do have a couple comments. I think part of it comes back to what we talked about today as professional learning communities and how it isn't, we create, in a sense, an overarching policy, but how are our teachers going to implement that at the student level, directly working with students? How well do they know their students' needs? What are they doing to address those needs? And another allusion, I'll just use one example of one little piece of curriculum, for example. One of the things that Dr. Cruz mentioned today was kids of poverty come to school, they enter kindergarten with a much lower vocabulary than kids that have been read to, talked to, had other kinds of experiences that we would typically classify as maybe middle class or upper class experiences. So for example, the last research I read was a typical vocabulary for a kid entering school of poverty is maybe 800 words. And it could be less if it's an English language learner. The typical vocabulary of a kid that comes from an environment where they're read to, talked to, addressed in using language all the time, maybe 8,000 or more words. So already kids are starting with this huge disparity. And one of the things, I'll kind of go in circles here, but I'll come around to it. When I was teaching working at elementary, one of the things that we did, and this is where professional learning communities come in, we were having some kids that were just not making it in 5th grade. And this was at Whitney Elementary School. And what we did was we identified, so you're having to look at the data. You look at what kids are not performing, what kids are performing. And in this case, we did take a deficit approach. We wanted to find the kids that were struggling the most. So we found we found eight 5th grade boys that were struggling the most, 8 5th grade girls. We just identified them. And then we said, okay, what's missing for them? Vocabulary. They don't know what's going on. They're sitting in the classroom. Words are flying by their head. They don't know what's going on. So we got a little grant and we did after school vocabulary development. And we took those kids and we used Anita Archer's vocabulary strategies made it fun, kept them after school, sent them home on the activity bus. We took those kids for like 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and we pre-taught all the vocabulary they were going to have in their science lessons, their English classes, and their math classes, so that they went into the next week, they had been pre-taught the vocabulary they were going to be hearing in their classroom. Well, guess what? I wish we'd have written down this study. Not only did those kids perform better academically, their behavior problems on the playground significantly reduced. Their behavior problems in the classroom significantly reduced. And they all perform better. So that's what we do is you take your PLC, you identify your kids, what's going on with those kids, and you address it. You strategically address it. And that's to me is equity. You find out what's going on, what do we do to address it? And that's at the kid level. And so if we have our PLCs doing that, we give them the tools to do that and get rid of the idea, well, these kids can't, I love the concepts he had this morning of, well, you're just not going to get away with, there's no hope for these kids, or, they come from poverty, they can't learn.
Or love will fix it all.
Or love will fix it all. No, I'm a big proponent of climate in schools and safe emotional growth and development and social emotional learning. But bottom line is, how are we addressing their academic needs, and are we doing it strategically and with detail? And so that's kind of how, this stuff is 30,000 foot level, and it needs to be there as our overarching thing. But what are our teachers doing that they have a sense of, they know what is equitable for kids and that they're being able to produce it for them? And so that's the that's the key, I think. Well, the other part of that too, I was having a conversation with our superintendent's mother and with one of my former reading teachers. And I said, every teacher at every single level in the school system needs to be a vocabulary teacher. They need to be checking for understanding all the time, because that's the key. Kids need to know you can't sit in a classroom and hear words go by. You're gone if you don't know what those words mean, English or Spanish. And by the way, a bonus with these kids is when we pre-taught vocabulary, we also asked them, what is that word in Spanish? A lot of them were English language learners. Some of them didn't know. So we also were teaching vocabulary in Spanish and English. So that's my story from the past. But I think that's where we have to get it to the level with kids, is what do they need? How are we going to deliver it to them? That's the solution.
Because if the words go flying by and it takes you even 15 seconds or 30 seconds to kind of dredge up from somewhere what that word means to you.
Yep. If you're translating in your head,
then you
all
have
the
lost
time,
what was said for
fine.
the last 15 or 30 seconds. And you then continue this downward spiral of not being able to catch up. Thank you, Norm.
President Rice?
Trevor.
Yes, I would like for Dr. Rodriguez to take us through the theory of action and the alignment with the YSD equity policy when you're looking at defining high quality teaching and learning.
Okay.
So thank you, Barb, for projecting this on the screen for us all. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Superintendent Green. So I think lots of wonderful questions, and I think the value of having done the equity study that we did is that we're having this conversation here at our board meeting with all of our directors. And a lot of the work that we've done over this last year, as you know, has led us to those 3 key strategies or 3 key levers. They crosswalk with our district strategic improvement plan, which, as you know, is a 20-page document with a lot of pieces. But we were really thinking about what are the strategies to get us to all of those strategic outcomes. We also crosswalked it with our district equity policy that was put in place a little over a year ago. And so I apologize for those with color blindness sitting next to me, but we did color code and crosswalk. So the theory of action that we developed in the teaching and learning department, right, was that if we implemented these 3 key strategies of professional learning communities, induction, mentoring, coaching, and principal supervision, and we provided access to high quality tools, and those are called out in the graphic that you saw this morning, right? These are cross-cutting tools of high quality standards aligned curriculum maps, and standards-based unit design. Then teachers will implement those foundational practices, which are also cross-cutting and called out in that 1-page document that, yes, we did laminate. So yes, it's forever, around culturally relevant pedagogy, dual language pillars, and inclusionary practices. Then that will lead to equitable positive outcomes for all students. And it is that outcome. So I hear what was shared around our definition, and it is a little wordy, and it talks about statistically blah, blah, blah. So I completely understand the comment about our equity definition. But the important part to me is that last sentence of our definition, which is that it's not about access, it's about outcomes. So when you think about the outcomes for our kids and getting to those academics, love is important. We're not here to say love is not important, but love can sometimes lead to inequitable outcomes for kids if we think, let's just be nice, right? The kind thing to do is to hold people accountable to the bar, to grade level standards or above, and to hold our staff to achieving that. Equity is about getting down to the individual student need. And the only way to do that is for the people who know that child best, which is their family and their classroom teachers, to be able to address what those needs might be. So it might be vocabulary. It could just as easily be one of 1,010 other things. And the folks who know that student the best are the best equipped to design a response and an intervention for that student to get them where they need to be. So we did crosswalk it. I just thought that would be helpful for you to see that those 3 key strategies really do line up directly with the statement in our equity policy. I don't know if that's helpful, but I wanted to share.
Thank you, Jenny. Raymond.
One last thing. I just want to be, make sure that our superintendent and the staff understand that this is not an attack on the district or leadership or anything, okay? So these are questions that were spurred by this equity audit. I understand that you all are doing the best you can with the resources we have, considering the pandemic and so forth and so on. I understand that and commend you for the work that you're doing. It's hard work. My frustration comes from being on the board for 17 years and this on test scores, right? And for some reason, and a lot of it, I believe, is beyond the control of the school district, right? And so I just wanted to make sure that the superintendent understand that it's not a personal attack. I'm not saying that the district is racist or teachers are racist or none of that. Okay, so I want to be very clear on that.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
If you were trying to offend me, I missed it. So I think next time, if you're trying, I never take it that way. So I appreciate
Okay.
that. I don't think my staff does it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just, when there's rebuttals or there's presentations after, then it seems like. But I just want to, be clear about that. So, but again, just thank you for all the work you guys are doing, and I know it's a arduous task to get all our students across that finish line at higher test scores. So, but thank you for that, and thank you for indulging me for the last.
Absolutely.
Well,
minutes.
I can't speak to the last 17 years, and I certainly thought we'd be in a different situation when I was hired 3 years ago. But we had some interesting things happen in our world during that time. But certainly would go back to actually. I think of I ran into Hector at Hector Mendez. Is he here? Yeah, there's Hector, and he has his little tag on. And as I was talking to Hector, I read his tag. And can you read us that tag below your name? Yeah, and I really love that we're shifting the word accountability to be something that's an expectation in our district, and it's not a negative word. We want to be held accountable. When I came into this district, that was certainly something that I hungered for, and I take very seriously the mantle of leadership that I hold, and I don't want to be in the same situation that you're describing after 17 years. Because I know that what we're doing now and moving forward and the levers that we have in place, and you saw the kickoff today, the common now terminology and experience that we've had as a district that we can now refer back to, that we were never able to do over the last 3 years, gives us that language and that expectation when we say all students, that we're talking about grade level and beyond. And we've just we've come to that common understanding. Here I'm doing his context. This is context right here. Everybody do this? Yeah, context. So, it's exciting, the situation in which we find ourselves, the hard work that has brought us to this point. I lament that we're having this conversation after 17 years, and I commend you for sticking with the board for 17 years, because I think I would be frustrated beyond belief living what you're describing. And I know that we have the right people assembled across our system, and I'm looking forward to the outcomes that our focus in these three areas will achieve. And so, yeah, thank you for your questions. I echo what Dr. Rodriguez shared in saying the beauty of what we have is we're now having these conversations that weren't out there previously. So thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for kind of pushing us into this discussion. I think it's been a valuable discussion and will help frame our work for quite a while now. So thank you for that. Are there any other comments before we move on? Okay. Next, we have comments from the public on agenda items. We have one from a dear friend. Hi, Bunker.
Boy, did I pick the right meeting to show up.
Yes, you did. I want to remind you and those who are watching that we do have some protocols for public comment. The speakers will be treated in a respectful manner. The board does not typically engage in dialogue at this time or respond to items that are not on the agenda. The audience is expected to give their attention to the speaker. And the speakers are asked to sign in prior to speaking Introduce yourself and state all affiliations with the district. If you are commenting on agenda items, do so during the first comment period and use the second comment period for items that are not on the agenda. Keep comments to 3 minutes. Speak only once in each agenda item. Refrain from discussing the performance of an employee or the interpretation or application of the district's labor agreements, including grievances, and refrain from making derogatory comments about individuals.
Good. I'm Phyllis Bunker Frank. I'm a retired speech and language therapist whose first job was with YSD 105. I was pleased to have my career at the Hearing and Speech Center, but also serve on the Yakima School Board for 12 years. And I think every one of those 12 years, we had an opening day that made the work worthwhile. And I'm so pleased to hear that you had that experience today. I'm just jealous. I wish I would have been invited.
You and 2,000 of your closest friends.
I'm sure. The parents. And I would like to hear that there were, we have faculty we have people that were there that are parents of kids in our school district, but I'm also hoping that our organization people were included, and if not this year, then next year. But my minutes are going. So, Raymond, I have been following the equity work of WSDA. I've been following your internal work here in responding to the new requirements. I was on the met with Insight when you did the the district improvement plan. And Raymond, I really appreciate the level of detail with which you read the report. I read what has been posted so far and what I've been able to glean out of it. So it's not going to be surprising that one of my simplest, long-standing stands about the most inequitable occurrence with our kids and learning is that we have a school calendar year that is depressive. Raymond, you mentioned the statement that did the descriptions describe us as a depressive district instead of one of opportunity. And I know that you all have done a lot of thinking. I've pushed it along the way, but I know, Superintendent, you are finding ways to grow the reflection. We have a school calendar year that plans for loss, that plans for disconnect, that plans for interruption. And I know you've been working at ways to massage that and change it. But quite frankly, thousands of our kiddos are coming to school next week, having been away from their sites of learning for 11 weeks. And it just has to be viewed as something as inequitable. At the large percentage of students who are free reduced lunch, as a district that is district-wide in terms of getting the benefits for poverty, I just would urge you, there isn't anything in the WSDA scripted training in what I experienced and what Insight led in school improvement planning that brought to the surface the barriers that are imposed by the traditional calendar year. So I just ask you in closing to maybe look into what reflective questions about what happens when kids come back to school after being away from 11 weeks and maybe a few hundred. I think I asked someone, Superintendent, I haven't heard the final report yet, but you had about 600 kids who were in summer school. But what do we know? What are we looking for in their learning? What are those grade level standards? What is lost with our kiddos? What's happened to their vocabulary, Norman, over the summer? So I hope that you don't mind that I send each of you the article that I wrote that appeared in Principal Magazine Washington State Principal Magazine. Norman, you didn't get a copy because I didn't have your email address entered correctly, but it is Why Balance the 180-Day School Calendar Year. And it was written on request, and it is in their digital magazine. So thank you, and keep the fire alive on the calendar.
Thank you, Bunker. And we'll get if you could leave that, can you leave that copy with Barb?
Oh, sure. And I can send an electronic as well.
Yeah. Barb will see that we get a copy and staff gets a copy as well. Thank you for being here. Okay. Nobody else signed in, Barb? Okay. Next, we are on to approvals. Our first approval tonight is for building improvement plans. This was tabled from last week's business meeting. It is an action item brought to us by Dr. Rodriguez. And you gave us some background on it last week. There are a lot of them, and I don't want you to go through all of them.
Yes.
We'd be here till tomorrow.
Mhm.
So if you could just give us, a little highlight and explain to us what we will see going forward, that would be great.
Sure, happy to do that. Thank you, Board President Rice. So you have before you a request for approval of the 2021-22 school improvement plan. So these are last year's plans, as we talked about last week. There's no fiscal impact. This work is part of our school improvement planning process, which is both annual and ongoing. These are really considered to be living documents, so you get to see them really at a snapshot at a place in time. They do evolve throughout the year with the work of our building principals and our instructional leadership teams. So the majority of these, you are seeing the end of your version, which really is the reflection on last year, and it's their starting point for this year. So you'll see the 22-23 plans coming to you here probably early winter. And so you'll see some changes that are made based on the work and the training that folks have had over the summer and as we kick off the year. The plans do guide the continuous improvement cycle, which is tied to the annually established goals. This is something that is required by our state. For schools that are improvement, there are additional pieces of work and support that come from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. Many of you know Dr. Pam Ansing, who her last day was Friday with us here in Yakima, and she did significant work around our school improvement planning process with all of our buildings during her time here in Yakima School District. You do have the live links to each of our sites plans. And again, as discussed last week, I'd be happy to bring different format or different information if that would be helpful to the board, as we need to bring these to you for approval annually per requirement from OSPI.
Thank you,
Happy to
Dr.
answer
Rodriguez.
questions.
The board is being asked to approve the 2021-22 school improvement plans as submitted. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Graciela, seconded by Ryan. Is there any discussion?
I just had one question. At what point, reading through the plans, I didn't see where the data was on the results of their goals. Does that come as part of the next plan, or, I'd be interested in seeing. And I wouldn't have unrealistic expectations in terms of the kinds of interruptions we've had, but it would be nice to see the results of their plans too.
Okay.
I appreciate that we moved this agenda item to the next week. I think it's, although it is something that is in the weeds, it's, if the board's being asked to approve, it's, from my perspective, I think just having more time to read through all of that. Having additional time is helpful. So.
Thank you. Anything else?
What would be helpful for me is maybe having a rubric of some type. So when I review this, I can say, okay, yeah, they're addressing equity, they're addressing this curriculum, whatever, or HR, whatever. So I think for me, that would be helpful. That way I can, again, review them, say, okay, yeah, I feel comfortable in, because I'm not going to know everything about them because there's some acronyms, abbreviations that I didn't even know what they were pointing to or what they were about. So, but yeah, so that would just give me a good frame of reference to better understand and to make these decisions right to approve. So,
Okay, thank you for that. Anything else? Okay, we have a motion and a second for the board to approve the 2021-22 school improvement plans as submitted. If you're ready for the vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It carries 5-0. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, for you and your staff's work on pulling these things together. And thanks to the building staff too, because I know this isn't a light lift to do these plans. Next, we have approval of payment for commodity food processing and handling fees for the school year 2022-23. This is going to be the Stacy Locke show for a few of these approvals.
Thank you, President Rice. Yes, we're going to talk about food for the next 4 action items here. So the requested action that the Board of Directors approves payment for commodity food processing and handling fees to OSPI Food Distribution for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for approximately $325,000 for the 22-23 school year. The fiscal impact is $325,000. And the background information is the Board of Directors requires all purchases over $200,000 to be submitted for approval. These purchases are required for the Child Nutrition Department to prepare meals.
Thank you. We have been asked to approve payment for commodity food processing and handling fees to OSPI Food Distribution for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for approximately $325,000 for the 2022-23 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Raymond. Is there any discussion? Does this include the snacks? I forget what the name.
Breakfast program?
No, not the breakfast program.
The vegetable fruit snacks.
Yes.
Stuff. That's coming next.
Oh,
It'll be in here.
okay. I should pay attention.
Produce purchase.
Produce
All right.
purchase, yeah.
Okay. Is there other discussion? Okay. All right. If you're ready for the vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It carries 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have approval of grocery, cleaning, and paper supply purchases for the school year 2022-23. Stacy Locke.
Thank you, President Rice. The requested action that the Board of Directors approves the purchase for grocery, cleaning, and paper supplies from U.S. Foods for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for approximately $1,550,500 for the 22-23 school year. The fiscal impact is $1,550,500. The background information, the Board of Directors requires all purchases over $200,000 to be submitted for approval. These purchases are required for the Child Nutrition Department to prepare meals. These purchases are authorized by using an inter-school agreement through the Puget Sound Joint Purchasing Cooperative, of which the Yakima School District is a member.
Thank you, Stacy. The board is being asked to approve the purchase of grocery, cleaning, and paper supplies from U.S. Foods for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for approximately $1,550,500 for the 2022-23 school year. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Graciela. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? It carries 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have number 5, which is
4.
4. God, I can't keep things. I really do need to get new glasses, I think.
I have new glasses, that's why I.
It's not helping? It's not helping
No,
me
it's
that you
helping.
have new glasses.
It's helping a lot.
Approval of produce purchase for the school year 2022-23. Stacy Locke.
Thank you, President Rice. Requested action that the Board of Directors approves the purchase of produce from Spokane Produce for the National School Lunch, School Breakfast, and Fresh Fruit and Vegetable programs for approximately $676,000 for the 22-23 school year. Fiscal impact, $676,000. Background information, the Board of Directors requires all purchases over $200,000 to be submitted for approval. These purchases are required for the Child Nutrition Department to prepare meals.
Thank you, Stacy. The board is being asked to approve the purchase of produce from Spokane Produce for the National School Lunch, School Breakfast, and Fresh Fruit and Vegetables program for approximately $676,000 for the 2022-23 school year. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries 5-0. Thank you. Next, we're looking to approve the milk purchase. Stacy.
Thank you, President Rice. What child nutrition program would not be complete without milk? So here we go. Requested action that the Board of Directors approves the purchase of milk from Springbrook Farms for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for approximately $537,000 for the 22-23 school year. Fiscal impact, $537,000. Background information, Board of Directors requires all purchases over $200,000 to be submitted for approval. These purchases are required for the Child Nutrition Department to prepare meals. These purchases are authorized using an inter-school agreement through the West Valley School District, of which the Yakima School District is a member.
Thank you, Stacy. The board is being asked to approve the purchase of milk from Springbrook Farms for the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for approximately $537,000 for the 2022-23 school year. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Graciela. Is there any discussion?
Quick question. Do we provide non-dairy milk options to students?
Those of us who
Yes.
are now lactose intolerant are wanting to
I had
know.
the same question in mind, too.
I believe so, but I'll check on it for you.
Okay. You know, that's something when it comes to equity, maybe that we don't think about very often. I think studies show 80% of Latino people are lactose intolerant. And so that would be an opportunity to maybe reduce some bathroom time too.
I will definitely look into it, get that information back to you.
Anything else? Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now it's going to be the Dr. Darling show for this one. We are being asked to approve to contract 13 school site coordinators. Dr. Darling.
Yes, thank you. So we are continuing our existing relationship and expanding the relationship by adding 9 more for a total of 13 for the school year. Our community and schools partnership, the site coordinators are responsible for, they meet with usually between 24 and 26 students, and they handle these students one-on-one and their families. And so the students, the site coordinators work jointly with the staff at the school, especially the principal. Hector had it at his building last year. And they really target those kiddos who need that extra one-on-one support and also to engage their families in the learning process. And so We're asking that the board grant permission to coordinate 13 school site coordinators through Community and Schools of Washington, the estimated amount of $806,000 for the 22-23 school year.
Okay. The board is being asked to grant permission to contract 13 school site coordinators through Communities in Schools of Washington in the estimated amount of $806,000 for the school years 2022-23. Is there any, I need a,
Move
It
to
may be-
approve.
Thank you.
Second.
It's late in the day. I was up pretty early this morning. Who seconded that? Graciela, okay. Was moved by Ryan and seconded by Graciela to approve this motion. Is there any discussion?
I do have one question. I noticed in the proposal that it's being paid for by ESSER funds. Is there a plan to continue this program beyond our ESSER endowment, that we absorb this into our budget?
Wonderful question. We are exploring those opportunities. There's no definitive source at this time, but we're grateful that we have some other opportunities to extend this beyond the September 2024 expiration date of our ESSER funding. So the answer for that, currently no, and yet we're taking this leap of faith knowing the importance of this position and how it impacts our buildings. If you have any further questions, I would look to invite Hector Mendez up, but only if you had further questions.
I just had one question, and maybe you know this. I noticed that there are 6 elementaries that are part of this cadre of 13. And I'm wondering if there is if there are plans to expand that to the other elementaries as well.
This year we asked them, how many more can we have? And they said 9.
Oh,
So they initiated a couple years ago in the Tri-Cities area, and this is the first time in our region. So we're kind of their guinea pig for this part of our state, our ESD, and so we're getting as many as they can have capacity.
they will let us have, huh?
and we're pushing them to get them bigger. So
Okay.
we are confident that as we expand and continue to find sustainable funding, they'll also be able to increase the program.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carries 5-0. Thank you. Next, we're back to Dr. Rodriguez. Approval to contract with Imagine Learning.
Thank you. This, you're going to have deja vu. So we've already approved this. You as a board have already approved this, but we are changing the funding source. So this is a purchase we've discussed previously, but we are moving the funds from levy funds to title funds. We are near the end of our fiscal year, as you are aware, and now is the time when we want to ensure we've used every dollar that has come our way and that we don't send any money back. So we have enough in carryover actually from COVID years when we did not spend as much to be able to cover this contract out of our title funds.
Okay. All right. The board is being asked to grant permission to contract with Imagine Learning LLC for the 2022-24 school years in the amount of $992,797.36 to provide a digital platform to support the math for kindergarten through 5th grade for all elementary schools and any additional student needing age-appropriate math in middle or high school. And 2, a digital platform in support of language and literacy for kindergarten through 5th grade ELL students for all elementary schools. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Graciela. Is there any discussion or are there any questions?
Procedural question. Since this has already been approved, are we not approving the source? for the budget? Or are we approving this, the awarding of the contract a second time?
I think that's what we're doing, is approving the awarding of the contract. The contract calls out the source of the funding, doesn't it?
No, well, it doesn't here, right?
No, but the contract itself.
Okay. But I heard that this is before us again because the funding source has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So
I
I just
refer you
want
to
clarification, so.
our legal expert, Bob No.
Thank you. My understanding of this item on the agenda is to change the source of the funds. It was previously approved. We're just asking that the board acknowledge and recognize that the funds are coming out of Title I and not levy. So we just want to make sure you guys are aware of that.
It's itemized on the fiscal impact on the letter in the board packet.
The fiscal impact is in the amount of that money.
It's itemized at the fiscal impact in the amount of 992, et cetera. Funding source is Title I, and there's an asterisk that says funding source moved from levy to Title I.
Are you asking that that be included in the motion?
I was just asking about what we were actually doing, so.
Okay.
It's been clarified, thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval. We already did that.
We already moved.
Well, okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carries 5-0. I really do need coffee, I think. Okay. And the last approval item we have today is approval to dispose of surplus property. Where's, oh, you, Dr. Green.
Yes. Wow.
I was looking for Jake. I'm sorry.
I'm glad you felt that too, because
It was not a barb.
of course it wasn't. Thank you. Yes, I neglected to share with the board earlier that when Assistant Superintendent Marietta was at negotiations, Jake is with him. And
okay.
We do not have Becky with us, and I think we need to give her a little leeway. We know that she's leaving here within probably the next week, so we're going to miss her greatly. So I'll go ahead and take this. The request before the board is permission to dispose of surplus property throughout the 2022-23 school year. So the requested action is that the Board of Directors declares equipment, supplies, furniture, and other district property obsolete and or surplus throughout this school year, and that these items be surplused through the most advantageous process to the district. No cost impact. The background information is that this RCW 28A.335.180 authorizes the board to declare equipment, supplies, furniture, and other district property obsolete and or surplus. So this will allow the district to dispose of surplus through the most advantageous process to the district, which may include Heberlo's auction, requests for bid, safe sale to the public, gifts or grants of the surplus items to other public or private schools, or any other commercially reasonable process which satisfies the above referenced RCW.
Okay. The board is being asked to declare equipment, supplies, furniture, and other district property obsolete and or surplus throughout the 2022-23 school year, and these items be surplused through the most advantageous process to the district. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Moved by Graciela, seconded by Raymond. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, we've reached the second opportunity for comments from the public, and no one else has signed in. So, Mr. Superintendent, do we have a need for executive session?
We do not.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right. I think everyone is anxious to get out of here and go home. All right. Seeing that there is nothing for the good of the order, Meeting is adjourned, and we will see you back here next Monday at 3:30 for our board meeting, and then at 5 o'clock for our joint meeting with the city council. And they're providing.
Dinner's provided, right?
Yeah, they're
We're
good.
not bringing- Okay. Okay.
And it'll be in this room.
Clarify.
We're not going home yet, we're going to open house.
I'm not.
You can.